while we're waiting for everybody else to join us, let's start with a little bit of housekeeping. Just to say that any questions, can you please put into the Q&A section rather than put it into the chat section over here. The Q&A will be answered by our support team, my sales support team based in Buenos Aires, London, and Cape Town. So they'll be managing all of that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk for about an hour, and then after that we're going to have an open question and answer session. And today's is just really about an informal chat with myself and some of our long-standing trade partners who I have the greatest regard for, who have been good friends for a long time, and we're just going to discuss the way forward. So I'd like to welcome you, everybody, and we're delighted that you could join us. When we last looked at our attendee list, we had about 600 people wanting to be joining today, and we have 6 fabulous panelists from 4 different continents across 16 time zones. So it's quite an impressive lineup we have, not to mention the over 120 years of combined African safari experience that we have here. Together, many of us over here have weathered many storms, but I can say without a doubt that this current crisis is the most significant and fundamental shift that we've ever had to face. And while we may be in the same storm, as we navigate our way forward, we have to acknowledge that we are not all in the same boat. We have different business needs, different responsibilities, and different objectives. But we all need to survive, and we all need tourism in Africa to survive as well. And I believe now is the time that we need to be open about what we require going forward in this current and in the post-crisis. And we should adapt some creative thinking towards our industry partnerships. And we need to be very brave and make the necessary adaptations and changes going forward. Today should have been the start of Indaba. And actually at about 4 o'clock at Indaba, we would have actually had drinks on our stand as well. So in over 20, I've been attended Indaba for, I think, 23 years. Even when I had a massive accident and I went in a wheelchair with my foot up after a chronic ankle incident, I was there, and I feel rather betrayed and robbed that we're not at Indaba this year. But I have to say, I think that this lockdown that we've had for 6 weeks has been a sort of a self-imposed trade show as well. I have never spent more time on a Zoom, on WhatsApp messages and on phone calls. It has been absolutely chronic, but it has been the most fantastic engagement and collaboration across our industry. We've also been sending out a few of our communications, and the 2 main ones that we sent out in our COVID comments was the one that we looked at pain, remain, and gain, which had a flurry of interest, which was one of the reasons why we decided to have this panel discussion. And in that communication, we looked at what has been our pain, i.e., what do we question about our current structure and industry that has not been working? What do we need to think about that is working, that we should carry forward, what should remain? And then what should we really be gaining going forward as well? What are we going to embrace? So the pain that we leave behind, what should remain, and what do we have to gain going forward out of this? The other communication we did last week was our impact infographic video, which shows our amazing 15 members in the Classic Portfolio tribe who operate in 27 protected areas across 12 African countries and collectively contribute $6.4 million every single year just in concession fees. That is, if that money is put in every year before we've seen a single guest arrive. And in the last 5 years, we calculated that we spent over $200 million investing in capital to develop tourism experiences. So while today's discussion is about our channel structure and our trade partners, and we're going to have more platforms going forward, which is going to engage with partners on the ground, with lodge owners. We need to recognize that if we do not get our governments to open the borders and get airlines to access Africa, we are all going to be in grave trouble. While we need to put pressure on our governments, we should now also use this time to build a stronger foundation upon which we can build sustainable tourism going forward. The 2 most important criteria here we need to acknowledge as well at the beginning are the guests who are traveling to Africa, and we need a lot more of those going forward. The products that are in Africa and supplying their experiences, we need those to remain and to be sustained, and we need them to, continue being viable entities. And you as our trade partners are the value in how you connect those guests to us in the long term. So with that, I'd like to introduce my esteemed panel, and I have to thank you all for being here today and jumping to the invitation. So first of all, there's Cherri Briggs. Cherri, hi there, who is from Steamboat Springs in Colorado and is the founder and managing director of Explore. And then we have Muriel, who is based in Toronto and is the founder and managing director of Askari Travel. We got Maija, managing director of Cape Town-based Go to Africa. Jonathan Wilson over here, who's staying awake. It's just past midnight in Brisbane, and he's the founder and co-owner of Encompass Africa. And I've got Justin Wateridge based in London and the managing director of Steps Travel, and previously the managing director of Abercrombie and Kent in the UK as well. And finally, a man who doesn't need no introduction, who I think most of the people listening today work with, is Craig Smith from New Frontiers. And what I've done is I've specifically chosen people from different fields. Craig being a DMC, Maija being an online tour operator, Justin being based in the US, Cherri being a well-established USA-based agent, Muriel being somebody and Cherri specializing specifically in Africa, Muriel who specializes in experiential travel but across the world, and Jono who's an African specialist out of Australia as well. So with that, we've got quite a broad spectrum of thoughts and ideas. So I think what we should do is jump into the first question that we have. I've got 4 nice questions lined up. And the first question I'm going to be posing is actually going to be going to Cherri and to Maija to answer, please. And then the others can give some input on it later on as well. And the question around this one is going to be about transparency and our rate breakdown. I think one of the biggest issues that many of our trade partners have faced has been the repayment and holding of monies and the whole jumble of the industry as we face this calamity around the COVID crisis. And while you have delivered your services up front, the money is moved into the system. Many times you're now having to unravel bookings, redo bookings, postpone bookings, cancel bookings, fight for your clients' rights, look at where the money is going and all of those sorts of things. We have to ask, if there had been greater transparency in this channel, would we have had such a disconnect in terms of what we're facing now? And that transparency needs to come in forms of what the client is paying upfront for in terms of the deposits that they're paying towards the camps and lodges and the service that you have been delivering to them. If we'd had transparency in this, would we currently face as much chaos in our channel? So Cherri, I'd like to ask you what you think about transparency and our rate breakdown going forward.
Yeah, well, honestly, Suzanne, I understand from speaking to you and a couple of other people that side on the lodge provider side, that people have struggled with clients who've been asking or demanding for breakdowns and so on. I'm not sure if we have a unique position in the market in terms of our relationships with our clients, but we really have not seen that. We're very upfront in our terms and conditions, how we work with our clients from the get-go. We tell them that we do not provide breakdowns and that if they want a breakdown, we'll give them the links to all the lodges and they can have their assistant break out the costs and that we will come in better. But we don't do that. We have a lot of special agreements, contracts with multiple providers around Africa. And frankly, it would violate our relationships with them to break things down in the way that you're referring to. And we have had literally no issues with that. I think one person said, well, surely all that money isn't in Africa now, and who made a large deposit. And my response was, well, 90% of it is, and part of it paid my staff because believe it or not, they're not volunteers. So we really haven't had that come up as an issue. And even in going forward, we have been successful in rebooking virtually all of our travelers up through September, some beyond, some through even October now, and just moving their bookings to the next year. And we've been fortunate, I think all of you have, with given our deep relationships with our providers, in almost all cases it has cost the client nothing extra. We have told people that if, conservation fees or visa fees go up, something completely beyond the control of the operator, price of fuel, which is unlikely because it's through the floor now, but there could be small fees that they would be responsible to cover because, it's not the operator's fault that the virus hit the world. So it's been quite an easy transition with a few struggles along the way. And really the way we've gotten through that is to tell people, look, you're making a voluntary loan to Africa to keep it alive until you're able to go there. But there's no one canceling, your trip has just been delayed. So I don't really see that as, the crisis has not changed our model for us or made us feel more stressed to do exact breakdowns.
Great, thank you. And Maija, your input on that side? You need to unmute yourself.
2 points. Sorry, I had it on mute because I have 2 rabid children running around in the passage. I just wanted to add to that. So the one thing is around transparencies and fee breakdowns, which I'll cover now. But I think the other major challenge we have is not only around the transparency issue, it is also around the fact that we are dealing with so many suppliers across the board in Africa, especially, where specialists like ourselves are covering most of Africa for the client as a destination, that the terms and conditions per supplier are unique. We're dealing with 1,000 different versions of how deposits should be paid, at what rate should be paid, what the terms are on that specific supplier versus others. So that's one of the bigger challenges now too, is that there's absolutely no uniformity across how to be dealing with deferrals and how to be dealing also with the various rates. On the transparency side, what we have found, and Cherri, I'm with you on being able to defer the majority of our bookings. So we've also seen deferral rates of 94, 95%, which has really been good to see. But certainly we have found it to be very useful, actually helping us in convincing clients around why they cannot get their cancellation fees back from underlying suppliers, because those suppliers need to be remunerated to keep conservation going and keep their communities going, but also to ensure that the client doesn't feel like they're being cheated. So I've been very comfortable for us in specifically identified cases to actually just be very clear with the client. This is what you paid, this is what we earned, this is what the cancellation terms are, and this is what comes out at the bottom. And this is what we can give back to you based on that. Now, the challenges, of course, is when we're dealing cross-source markets, for instance, obviously the UK and the EU having the legislation around allowing for full refunds. So those clients often are not understanding of even the cases where we do provide transparency. They just believe it's their right to get the full monies back. And then, of course, the US is in a similar position in terms of the consumer being highly protected and not always understanding why we should retain some of the fees where cancellation is taking place. Of course, again, that cancellation discussion and the transparency of fees discussion really only comes up when we're dealing with cases where clients actually aren't prepared to defer for whatever reason.
I think from a product perspective, thank you both. I think from a product perspective, what we are finding is that our non-refundable deposits that were in place weren't necessarily paid over, and the product has actually been left in many cases with absolutely nothing on the table, and that has been a big issue, and we were the ones with the biggest responsibility of the ground. So but if there was greater transparency and you could explain to somebody this cost is actually being sunk in by these products, and we needed that investment into Africa, it would have been a great help. And in some cases, we've also been in a situation where the park fees and the conservation fees have been separated out. Well, we've done that in some of our more remote destinations. And the travelers who are postponing have left that portion on the table and said, we will contribute that for this year and repay it again next year. But that has come through having transparency about what percentage has been going towards conservation.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think one of the big challenges we're all facing now and suddenly all waking up to, which we didn't really have to focus on too much pre-COVID, is the fact that, you know, as you say, tour operators or agents often hold onto deposits and don't pay on because either they've waived the deposit terms because of, you know, having various negotiations, or because it just hadn't been paid over at that stage. I think where there isn't full understanding throughout the travel value chain is at which point does that money actually belong to which stakeholder. So when we're talking about, as a tour operator or an agent, collecting a deposit from our clients, you know, we will justify, as you said, Suzanne, that our fees are incorporated in that, and that we've earned that fee upon the advice and consultation and the booking confirmation and all the administration that's gone around that. So we've actually already earned that fee. The question then on the supply side is, when does a supplier actually earn that deposit? So let's say it's a 20% deposit. Is that deposit earned at that stage for reservation fees and the administration around getting that booking into their door? Or is it actually only earned once the traveler has put their bum in seats? And like, we need to get consensus on those kind of like key principles so that we can then actually navigate the situation we're in. The challenge we have is that we're all coming with different viewpoints and different stances, and we're not getting together and actually just agreeing what it should be so that we know exactly how to move going forward.
So if I open up to the rest of the panel and I'll ask you for one recommendation in terms of transparency of what a client is paying for when they come to Africa, what would a recommendation be from any of you going forward? Would you make any changes to what you were currently doing, or would you keep it as it exactly was beforehand?
Yes, I would make changes. I don't believe in itemization, i.e. a breakdown of costs. I think that drives everything down to price rather than value, and I think we're all about value.
What about lump summing it to say conservation versus line by line?
So similar to Rita Cobbin and Fogo Island, she has economic nutrition, and I think a good sort of breakdown like that, where it's gone to staff, it's gone to conservation, etc. I think that's exactly right. But if you do a line by line, I think you're opening a can of worms for yourself.
Totally agree.
Can I say something, Suzanne?
Yeah.
I feel really strongly, and have for many years, that we should be able to, that it would be helpful if the providers, if the lodge owners would give us some breakdown from their side. And I know from having years ago been on the Botswana Tourism Board that there's reluctance to do that from their side, simply because they can call upon them scrutiny from governments regarding taxes and fees. But it would definitely be helpful for us, I think all of us in selling, to say, look, in Botswana, X% goes to paying local people who are employees, and then, you know, senior staff, guides, concession fees, wildlife fees, leases, maintenance, and that's why it becomes so expensive. Then it becomes, you know, it's realistic that, maybe it's not realistic what Mambo costs right now, but it's realistic what many camps are charging, that it's not just for that value added, but there are very real costs. And I think people are completely opaque on what those costs are and how they serve conservation and community.
You know, Cherri, I totally agree with you on that. I think as a product, if we are asking our channel to be transparent, as a product, we need to be transparent as well. We should start sharing a lot more of our costs and start explaining where the money goes and why we're charging these fees up front. I definitely do believe in that. And one of the things we've spoken about as well is actually taking out our concession fees and taking out the cost of operating in these areas and putting it as a separate item and dropping the bed night fee of things as well. And saying that's how much it costs to be here and that's how much it costs for the experience when you are here. But separate out our responsibilities on the ground, most certainly. Any other comments over there, or should we?
Yeah, just one comment that's gone around the table a couple of times. I mean, we're all engaging with each other or suppliers or other stakeholders, is, you know, the question around whether one needs to go to a net rate model where one then just adds up with the service fees to that in terms of what service you offered. Of course, there's a lot of debate around that too, and it's certainly, I would argue, would then boil down to price. And why is someone charging, you know, 20% and someone else is charging 10% or whatever the fee structure is? It becomes quite messy, and it becomes really, especially as an online player, really all about price then, and that's also not where we want to be. So just to raise that point though.
And I think I was looking at a comment over here by Elizabeth Halliday, who's just talking about fake conservation fees, which I think is a very, very valid comment, very valid on that side as well. Okay, I want to move the next one we want to move on to, which has been another real sticky issue, which we've been facing right now. We've touched on it a little bit. You started on the conversation, Maija, and it's going to be a further a situation where how we're going to be building things going forward. And this one I'm really going to be proposing initially to Justin, as he's based in the EU and working under EU law, and to Muriel, who's based out of Canada but selling the world. And I wanted you to give us your input in terms of dealing with niche experiences across many destinations, how other people are managing their policies in terms of our terms and conditions, which are so not aligned and all over the show. So I do agree there is an opportunity in how to align things there, and the payment of deposits. So it is a hot topic right now, and we need to look at the situation where our policies have not been aligned. And when business, we've had our terms and conditions on this side to our DMC partners who've had different terms and conditions onwards. And when business was flowing, this wasn't a problem. But now that we've had a slowdown in business, who's contracted to who and where the money belongs has become a rather debatable issue. So what if we're coming out of this and looking at the situation where we previously had non-refundable deposits, what are we going to do going forward? And in this, we need to realize that in many cases, the money has, as I said before, not been paid down to the property level. And many lodges as well have upfront costs that they need to bear before the guest has even arrived. And I'm there thinking specifically of seasonal camps in remote destinations. So Justin, if you could give us your input on the terms and conditions and deposit payment in going forward.
I think going forward, there has to be lots more flexibility in terms and conditions. I think that we need to restore client confidence, and I think that one way to do them is to give that freedom, not least because they're going to have difficulty getting travel insurance. They won't be able to get it for COVID-19. And so they want to know if they contract it and they have to cancel, at what stage will they get their monies back. So I think you need flexibility. You asked in comparison to how Africa compares with other parts of the world. There is a lot more flexibility in, say, Asia. You don't have to pay deposits in the same way. So it is different, and Africa are much more stringent in terms of deposits up front.
And Muriel?
I'm just going to say that I think the biggest, and I agree with Justin, a lot of Asia is much more flexible. South America, in a way, though, have somewhat adopted the African way in the 20% upfront non-refundable, but they are more flexible on cancellations. The biggest concern is how we're going to ask for or create a situation where people are willing to pay non-refundables when many parts of the world are coming out and saying no deposit and flexible booking, cancel up to 7 days, and they're available to be reached on a direct flight.
Yeah.
And
now, Suzanne, I think if I can just say, a question that we get often is, why do the suppliers want a deposit at all? And it really boils down to one of two things. One, which you've alluded to, is the 20%. If there was a 20% cash amount that was paid across to suppliers, is that being used for operational costs before the clients have even arrived in camp? And whether that is something that should be done. So that would be the one reason that lodges or suppliers might ask for a deposit or a non-refundable deposit. The other would be to guarantee cancellation fees in the event of a cancellation. Although many of us as DMCs or even as the agents would give a guarantee that we would underwrite those cancellation fees in the event of a cancellation policy. So the actual physical handing over of a 20% deposit in terms of a cash to a supplier well in advance before clients even get there, really, I think from the supplier side needs some careful explanation, or it actually just needs to be, as we've done in the past, an understanding that there is a 20% that covers cancellation fees rather than actually being paid over to the supplier.
And Craig, we have done that in the past, but when the crisis has hit like this, that money just hasn't flowed. And we need to realize that the situation that we're in now is not a short-term situation. We are in for a rolling series of COVID-related setbacks for years to come. I do not see this as going to be over in December. And even if a vaccine is found, we're still going to have setbacks of this kind. So,
what you're talking about then is a breakdown of trust, of that trust between the DMC or the agent and the supplier, because in this event, the cancellation fee or the deposit hasn't been paid over. But I think that's a trust issue that's got to be dealt with as an industry rather than as a blanket non-refundable 20% deposit.
No, well, I think going forward, we as product, we need the deposits. We feel that as a product, we need deposit because it gives intent to the booking coming into us. And when we've got small camps that we're dealing with, we know what we're managing then in terms of what we can apply. If we do not have a deposit, and we're saying to our products going forward as well, on any booking that is postponed, if there's no deposit, it is essentially a provisional. But we can't confirm something unless it's got a deposit attached to it.
Right, but in the chain that we're talking about, the deposit is held. It's just held, in our case, by our agent. It's guaranteed to us by our agent. We don't take that money from the agent. We don't sit on a 20% deposit, but there is an understanding that our agent has collected that 20% deposit. It's owed to us in the event that the client cancels. And we have that understanding with the supplier that, in turn, if the client cancels, that 20% deposit is owing to you. I think the question now, which a lot of people are asking, is why must that 20% deposit be paid 6 months in advance before a client gets there? And then post-COVID, we're talking about a certain nervousness about whether those funds should be sitting with someone when the whole chain is in a little bit of financial insecurity at the moment.
Well, I think what happens, yes.
Yeah, just to interject there, just to make a point on what Craig's saying and what you were saying around suppliers needing the deposit. I mean, maybe I'm being naive here, but I mean, now that COVID-19 has happened and we're in the midst of it, and you're saying that the flow of those deposits are not being honored, right? The flow of the funds for cancellations are not going back to the suppliers. I mean, that's just a clear breach of contracts. Craig refers to trust. It's not only trust, it's breach of contract. And any agent that is actually not the cancellation fees due, if they are due, and the supplier has not agreed to cancel those cancellation fees, COVID-19 or not, that's a breach. And I mean, you can say what you want, it's happening. I totally understand it. But again, I know. But again, for me, it goes back to the principle of we need to decide as an industry, is there a deposit, isn't there? And if there is a deposit, how is that money actually spent? Who owns that money at which points? Who can hold it? Should that money be kept safe? I mean, there's so many complex topics around it, but as an industry, we actually need to align and agree on what sits where in order to proceed.
I agree. I think it's absolutely essential that for us to build a way forward, we do need to be aligned. I think the biggest disconnect has come through so many different policies and everything going in different directions and everybody having their own terms and conditions. So a framework of policy would actually be quite beneficial for people to understand where the money flows and how the money flows, and for you as our trade partners to be able to work with us, knowing that generally in Africa, this is how it works and everybody's working off the same basis. Would that be of assistance?
Yeah, but I mean, again, the underlying point is, Craig, you and we, Sam, we all have terms with suppliers where we don't actually pay the deposit over, they waiver the deposit, but there's an explicit understanding that if there's a cancellation, we owe them those cancellation fees. And people that are not abiding to those terms now, and I know why. People have spent deposits, they don't have anything to pay the deposit over, but that just exactly shows how broken this industry actually is. Because people are spending money they weren't meant to spend in the first place, and now they're breaching contracts. Now, obviously, many relationships is being broken. And I certainly, on a very personal level, hope that suppliers won't be working with those people going forward that are breaching those contracts and breaching that trust, because it's not meant to be. It's not being commercially responsible.
Something that we do, that I do in Australia, which is a hangover from an old system that Australia had, was you have to run a trust account for clients' monies. Yeah. And that's how we continue. Exactly. We have client money and business money, and not a cent is spent on the company of clients' money. Profit from a trip put together is only transferred to our business account once that client gets back. the client's money is the client's money until the day they get back, basically. And then we transfer and that's made life for us very easy in a very hard situation, because we know exactly to the cent whose money this is. If they need a refund, it goes. If Craig needs deposits on trips that I've cancelled and the cancellation fees, it was sent today type of scenario. And that's made the murky waters of whose money this is so much easier for us at the moment.
Yeah.
And we are actually in Canada governed.
One thing that we've been seeing that I think we should caution the lodge owners about is in many cases, the property owners are becoming more flexible with their deposit demands, as you were mentioning, Suzanne. And I think this is dangerous. I think that if people want to go to Africa and we start letting them book that, like, you know, the city hotel at the airport and cancel 24 hours in advance, the industry is going to become absolute chaos. I think that reasonable requirements for deposit, maybe they're broken into 3 instead of 2, maybe that's 10% up front and then 20 and whatever, but that we have to, the lodge owners, I feel very uncomfortable reserving space with them without giving them anything. I don't think it's good business, and it makes me feel responsible. You know, people don't make commitments unless they put up money. So I think that that's one thing we could encourage providers not to do. But, and as you said, Jono, it's very easy to have a separate account. We don't call ours an escrow account, but we have 2 accounts. Well, we have more than 2, but one is for people, you know, monies that we know more or less belong to the client and ultimately the provider, and then our operational account. And we're going to be even more strict about that. And I think if you tell clients that in the future, they'll feel very comfortable about that. But they also need to understand that doesn't mean you're going to get your money back.
Can I say, I think that this is just important, do you think there is an opportunity within the structure? So some lodges and camps who ask for the deposit, they've got a rolling business that is happening all year round. Their business is ongoing. Their requirement for a deposit is slightly less than a company that is setting up every season. And I'm thinking specifically now of working with Blue Safaris in the Seychelles, who've got Cosmolido. It's an island in a very remote area. They need a mobilization fee. It's a setup cost in advance. Is there a chance, even under EU law and in different countries, where you can say to a client, this deposit is non-refundable. It goes towards setting that project, it goes towards setting that portion of your bed up. Unless they are able to use that, we're not going to be able to, the experience will not be able to be provided. There are other camps we know within the Zambian situation, where when you build camps for the season ahead, they are using that cash flow in many ways. And we know we should not be using the cash flow. It should all be in an escrow or in a separate holding account so that it can be paid back. But the reality is not necessarily there. How do we get beyond this going forward?
I think the complexity is that you have different suppliers in different countries. You have different SMCs in different countries. In the UK, we've looked at escrow accounts, but we're bound by the package travel regulations and also by the CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority. So we can't necessarily do that because of our cash flow and our commitments to them. But I think that what this has done is highlighted the complexity of travel terms and conditions. And rather than having a one-fits-all T's and C's, we've been much more segmented in different markets, different areas. So we have a different one for camps or for Southern Africa as opposed to Southeast Asia as opposed to Central America. And that our terms and conditions need to be far more flexible and astute to be able to reflect that.
We are governed in Canada by very strict trust accounting, very, very, well, in Ontario anyway. We're not a cent, like you, Jono, you said it was a holdover, but it is actually still enforced here very strictly. Any money in from a client can only be paid out for services rendered for that particular client, and no profit until the last day of their trip can be withdrawn. So it's a very comfortable feeling because we've abided by that, and we've never had that sort of angst about not being able to feel confident that we have the money if anybody wanted it. But they're never told it's non-refundable. It's just, it's a government regulation, and it has actually served us very well in this crisis.
And are you charging a service fee up front that you can spend before the client has traveled? So all the work that you've done, all the expertise that you've done, everything like that, is there any service?
No, not very often, Suzanne, because for new clients we do, it's not a big fee. It's a $500 engagement fee, which is basically saying, this is going to take work. We're going to give you the best, it's an engagement fee. You work with us, we're going to create something beautiful together. Yeah. But legacy clients, no, we don't charge anything because they take multiple trips per year. And most of the time when they engage us, they actually book and they refer their friends. So we may charge their friends a fee on the first go round, but it's difficult.
So this actually takes
Canadians are nicer than Americans.
Yeah, it's not difficult. So this actually takes us into the next question that I have, which I'm going to be posing to Craig as a DMC partner and to Jono, who's based in Australia and possibly using services of a DMC. I don't know whether that's because of time zone differences, but is that where does the value offered in the channel lie? Where is the value proposition? Who's offering value to who? I personally have a really big issue that I think that the travel industry is completely undervalued. And I think that we've always kind of tried to so often bring in a price that is below rack or whatever else it is. And I think that we should actually, there should be a greater value proposition. You have got expertise. You invest in yourselves. You invest in your staff. You invest in traveling in Africa. You invest in our relationships with us as the product. So why don't we stand up, or why don't you as our trade partners stand up for the value that you are offering to your clients? You are offering a professional service. So we'd like to understand who's servicing who. And that comes to another question. I was thinking of something like with products, should we be selling at a base net rate? And then you all add on your services and your value thereafter, as opposed to a rack rate where we are taking out of the value system. So it's just kind of thinking in different ways, but I do believe there is good value in the channel and understanding why are we charging for that, or are we allocating that correctly? Craig.
Wow, you put a lot of things in. You put a lot of topics in there in one. Each one is worth 20 minutes.
I'm trying to show you guys a moose. Want to see a moose?
Thanks, Cherri.
Sorry.
So I think, look, we've worked through during this crisis. We've worked with a lot with our suppliers and fellow DMCs and our agents. I think there's a couple of things. One, there's definitely a misperception amongst the whole channel and the whole trade that someone else in the chain is making more money than someone else in the chain.
You're definitely making the most.
I'm actually making the least. So, I think we need to get past that perception that someone in the chain is always feeling cheated. And I have to say that in the chain, probably the way things work right now in terms of how much profit each person makes or how sustainable their business is, we're probably smack bang in the right place that we need to be. Now, whether you account for that as a commission and the commission structure that is based off rack rates, or you start from a different point, which is a net rate building upwards, we're going to come to the same net effect. None of us in the chain can operate for any less than we are, I don't think. Some of us would like to operate for a bit more, and if you think you can operate for a little bit more, then good luck. So getting back to your points of rack rates, my personal feeling is that rack rates are a very outdated way of working. And we're stuck in this chain of commissions and how much each person gets in the chain and how much we can charge because of the rack rate that is setting what we can do. If the rack rate did not exist and we went to a point where we could build up, so you had a net value of something and everybody added on what they thought they were worth in the chain and came to an amount, if the client thought he was getting value for that amount, it wouldn't matter what it was. The problem comes in when the client gets that and then can go online and see, oh, I am actually paying X, but I should be getting it for X. Then his perception of value is skewed because there is a base point. If you, for instance, went and bought an apple from, in the UK, from Tesco, or from in the US, Costco, and you bought an apple from Waitrose or from Whole Foods, you're happy to pay that extra at the premium supermarkets because you don't have a concept of what an apple should really cost you. And we should be in the same situation where we think, Suzanne, one of your products is sellable at X because I can add on my value with my team, and I think my team is phenomenal, so I can add on X. Jono thinks, well, his team is phenomenal, he can add on X to the consumer. And the consumer is happy to pay whatever that might be because they feel satisfied with the service that they've gotten, as long as there's no point of reference that they can go to. And that then everybody is free to charge as much as they want in the chain.
Personally, I think that that is a far better way to go. I think working from a base and you add your value on is a really good way to go. And as a product, if we sell direct, or when we sell direct, we add our service value on as well. That gives the margin. But I don't understand why you should be cheaper. So if somebody comes and books through, you know, you've got Craig servicing, you've got the 24-hour on-the-ground service over here, you've got all these other services, and you've got an expert who's you're booking within a country, surely you should appreciate the value. It's that is adding value to this, and that value that you're adding is absolutely essential. But the question on that is, would the channel start being transparent about that value as well? Or do you say, once you've taken our base rate at X and you've added in layers and layers and layers, are you saying then that the product is now worth X times 2? Or are you saying the product is still worth X and you've added on your value portion of the other sector? And if you choose to go from a travel agent to a wholesaler in the USA who then books via a DMC, that's your value proposition. That's your value chain that you've chosen to work through. But the product is still the same product that you're buying.
Yeah, I think
So Jono was the other person who needed to answer on this one as well.
I think from me, and we've all probably gone through a lot of emotions through this since this all kicked in, but one of the most disheartening things is how undervalued our consumers think we all are in the chain, especially now what we're facing in Australia. There's a big class action going against all travel companies for all consumers demanding every single cent of their dollar back, regardless of the current law, which is disheartening because you have provided a service. That the common argument is no service has been provided to date, especially on deposits. And we're saying, well, yes, you know, you sent me an email, I replied, you then phoned me, I spent 2 hours on a phone call. I came into the office on Saturday because it was convenient for you, and we'd spent another 2-3 months of dealing with each other. You booked a holiday, you gave me a $10,000 deposit. Why did you give me that deposit? If you think no service, what was that for? That was to book a holiday, is the common answer, and that's exactly what we did. You haven't paid for the holidays yet. You haven't paid for the game drive, the drinks, the sunsets and that, because you haven't paid the balance of your holidays yet. And it's been really disheartening because you think, wow, I spent 20 years trying to do this job and suddenly someone thinks I'm of no value. And that's, you know, I've been thinking about this for a while now, and it's, you know, it's something that we have to charge a fee or a service fee, or in 2 parts, basically like an architect, like a lawyer, like other professional services do the exact thing. And we don't, we're hiding in a very big commission structure, and we're not, you know, for me, moving forward, how do we reset what we're going to do and reboot it is definitely looking at a different way of doing it, in terms of saying, right, if you want to plan the holiday with us, the planning fee is X. If you want us to add, similar to an architect, if you go back, if you get an architect to design your house today, you pay him a fee. If you go lose your job because of COVID-19, you can't afford to build the house anymore, you can't go to the architect and ask him for your fee back. And that's similar to us. If you plan the holiday, that's the fee. The second part would be, okay, if you want us to administrate that and secure the whole holiday and do what we normally do, that's the second part of the fee. similar to what an architect would charge for, okay, if you want me to administrate the build and oversee it and that's a similar fee.
I totally agree with that, that travel is about people. And if we start talking about product, then everything becomes homogenized and it's about price. So we talk about people, we still remain relevant, and it becomes personal, and it's about value. And to add to Jono's point there, then I think we have to change our wording. We talk about deposits. That's like an online transaction. So we need to talk about a consultancy fee, a service fee, a mobilization fee on the ground, and segment it that way. I totally agree.
Just going back to that, I would just like to mention, I've got WhatsApps going here as well, but a message from Andy Hogg at the Bushcamp Company was to say a deposit is vital, he feels, because this is money is a present cost for a future benefit. The future benefits could be at the end of the year, but the deposits are crucial for the products. You know,
it might be vital.
That becomes a mobilization fee.
Change the semantics, the terminology of it.
Yeah, it is.
100% agree. Deposits can never be like, it is vital for many businesses and the seasonal ones and camps that need to get it mobilization fees. And I think people realize a long haul holiday naturally requires a deposit, because you can't just cancel the day before and expect a walk-in the next day. It's not going to happen. And that's why you do need these deposits in the first place, just for that very reason. But yeah, it's getting that, that I think a net rate and then adding on along that chain is an easier way of doing it moving forward. It's a lot more transparent, and people, and you can value yourself in that chain. This whole situation has got, you know, you pick up the phone and you don't know what's going to be on the other side of it. Is that camp still going to be there in a year or 2 years time? We don't know. Is operators or DMCs, it's such a fluid situation at the moment, but it's very comforting to know the partners like Craig, you know, that let's say there's a fee, a rack rate is $1,000 and we have a commission of 20%. If my value is that I need to work with a DMC because of the time zones and that, I accept that I need to give up some of that to someone else to help me. And that's the partnership that we, you know, everyone will have their different reasons for working along in the chain.
And Jono, that's your business. And Jono, that's your business choice.
Yeah.
Your business choice. So I believe everybody has a part to play. Everybody has a part to play, but it's your decision what part you want to play and how many parts you want to play in how you create an itinerary. But everybody has a part, and everybody's business needs are different on that side. And one thing that is really clear over here is that, yes, it is terminology. And if I look, I've got other comments here from Murray Collins, who said that, you know, the lodges and the camps on this side are taking the greatest risk, so they should have the deposit on their side as well. But I think what we're really saying here is our terminology right? Are we using the right words? And that's why I'm saying this rack rate commission structure, that just gets the product irked up, because they think you're taking away, versus if we say it's a base rate and you add on whatever your service fee is on top of that. And we start thinking about things differently. The answer usually would be the same, but how we get to that result changes. And we need to just start looking at things in a completely different way. And now, of all times, is to challenge how we've structured things, and should we be doing it differently going forward on that side as well.
Look, Suzanne, I do want to just point out, just quickly from a DMC perspective, is any service fee or any consultancy fee that any of us add on is not going to replace the commission that we receive from suppliers in its entirety at any stage, and that there still has to be some cost to the supplier in the supply chain that is being passed on, whether you're talking about reducing that cost or not. There still has to be an acquisition cost from the supplier chain to the channel along the way. There's no way that any of the service fees or consultancy fees that any of us could ever charge could replace the amount of income that is needed to keep the channel going.
But that is our fee. That is our fee to you, because that's the value you're giving us. That it is. I see you as partners and you giving us value. So that's why we give you a rate. That is because there's value in that rate.
Right,
and
but we still have to turn them like a commission model, because what that rate in part is doing is protecting us from direct bookings that might go through to a lodge or through another channel. So there still needs to be a commission structure where that is paid, where there is a rate that is lower than if clients went direct through the system. And we're not the only industry that does that. Sometimes we think that we're operating in isolation. Almost every single industry operates on a commission or kickback or referral structure. And from the supply chain, you're never going to get away entirely from that. I understand that you might want to structure the actual amounts differently, but there still has to be some acquisition cost from the supplier.
And
But
so we say something in regards to Murray's comment about risk. Hi, Murray. I haven't seen you in a long time. But I was thinking about this just last night. I thought some of these questions might come up in this panel. And I feel that we as operators that are delivering the clients and selling the product on this side are actually at the front lines and taking a lot of heat. I think that we form a firewall between ourselves, our companies, and the flack that you might be getting directly. We are the ones who'll be sued, if you're in America, Canada, Australia, by the clients. Class action suits in Australia, that's unbelievable. I hadn't heard that one yet. But yeah, everybody takes risk in being in this business. And we're all gamblers because we're in the travel business. We've seen everything from 9/11 to Ebola to now this thing. And so it's a risky business, and it goes like this, along with the stock market and with borders being closed and stuff. So what you said, Suzanne, I mean, the way we see our relationships with providers, lodge owners, is we truly are partners. And when it comes to commission, we feel that we very much earn that because, we're the PR people sitting here in the office talking to people. We're not necessarily sending out press releases, although sometimes we do that. But we're talking to the clients every day on your behalf, and we're convincing them that they should come to your camps because basically, we're your representatives, and you don't pay us directly, but you pay us through commissions. We deal with the client, their fears, their insurance issues, their visas, and we deliver them to your doors. And if they break their leg, we deal with them again. So, and any complaints they have when we come back, they don't fall on the lodges, they fall on us. So we've recently changed our terms and conditions and made them much harder, well, more strict. And in our new terms and conditions, we are incorporating a lot of language about the lodges, about the providers, the third-party providers that work with the lodges, to cover you as well, because we don't want you to have to deal with what we're dealing with people who aren't necessarily upset that you're sitting on $20,000 of their money for a year. So yeah, I mean, there's risk on both sides.
I agree with you. I want to hand over to Maija, who needs to you need to take your mute off, Maija. Okay. But just before that, I want to just be very, very clear. When I'm speaking about developing a model that is a net up, if the person comes to us directly, we charge a service fee, which is essentially that suggested selling price. So I'm not saying that the net rate that is offered as a product is the net rate that we would offer somebody direct, because there's a service to deliver that person into the bed. So no matter what, if we do the service, we charge the service. If we don't do the service, we hand it all over to you to deliver upon that service. So there will always be a protection from that side, most definitely. So Maija, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one point, because the one thing I feel like we're forgetting here is the actual clients. My experience has been through both my direct experience and through our sales team, is that when you actually explain how this industry works to a client, they totally get it. They understand that we paid by the in form of commission for ensuring that they get delivered a holiday in line with their preferences and their needs and their budgets and to the destinations they want to go to. So when you just break it down in simple terms, the client understands the value that you're adding. So to me, there's nearly a little bit of the question going on is like, do we not just need to reposition and rebrand ourselves in terms of the value that we actually do add to the client? The problem is, or the challenge is, that obviously with the internet being around for 25 years, or gosh, how long is it now? I don't even know. Don't quote me on that. You know, often customers get fooled into believing they can do this themselves. And the reality is a destination like Africa is still complex and complicated to maneuver on your own, unless you're going to Cape Town and flying up to one Kruger camp, which you can still book on your own. But the point again is going back to the client understanding why they actually need an expert to navigate them through putting together the African itinerary. And if we could successfully do that and kind of remind the clients again why they actually need the various stakeholders, the various partners in the travel ecosystem, I feel like there's a big part of the problem that we can actually kind of erode already.
I'm the sort of traveler, I was due to go on a trip to India, which was cancelled. There's absolutely no ways that I'm sitting there piecing together a trip around India. It's not
time. Just think of the time it's going to take you.
I was going with Rob Barber and Epic were doing the whole thing, thinking, you sort it out. I'll just pay. Just tell me what to pay and when to pay it. And in the end, I didn't go because I got sick. And I said, somebody else must sort it out. But I certainly didn't get to moan and tell everybody to pay me back because I got sick. You know, it was, I said, that's my tough luck. I'll claim. Did I take out insurance? Yes, I did. So that's my thing. So I don't understand how people can be so illogical. Is essentially it. But I suppose that's the majority of what we seem to be dealing with. So I would like to now, finally, as we're moving on, just kind of think about what we should be doing. And actually, this was something that Alistair Rankin contacted me this afternoon from Machaba Safaris. And I switched one of the questions around and I added in this one rather to say, what should we be doing right now to start building a way forward? So how are we going to get business? How are we going to make sure that Africa stays relevant within this global crisis? We now have destinations discounting. I was reading the other day that we've got Sicily and Portugal, and I see Marissa here from Spain is saying even in Spain, the government is incentivizing travelers to come and visit. Well, in Africa, it ain't gonna happen. There's no help from our governments whatsoever. So what are we gonna do to get business? Do we literally gonna go drop our pants now and start offering everything at the cheapest rate ever? So how are we going to build this forward? And I think we've kind of gone through what we should be fixing, but I think what we should look at now is as business is starting to waken up a little bit, what do we do to build new strategies, and how do we ensure that as the world starts mobilizing again in terms of travel, how do we get our fair share of that? So Muriel, you've been quiet for a little while. I'm going to pose that one to you to start. But I'd like you to answer that.
On the discounting thing, you know, I heard something very, very relevant the other day, and it was about, you know, people being afraid, and that is what we're dealing with. People are afraid on many levels. They're afraid to fly, but they're mostly afraid to land in a place where the medical care is not as it is at home. And they're also afraid prior to departure being caught up in all this again. So, and the phrase I heard was, if someone is afraid, giving them a 20% discount is not going to make them less afraid. Okay, so I think the discount thing, yes, there may be some incentives or something, but I don't think discounting is the answer. I think the answer is to address head-on the issue of the recurrence of this situation and ensuring and comforting people that if there is a further spike, or if airports and countries are closed again, for that specific reason, we need to address that specific reason. All the other people want to come. We've had calls from people saying, you know, what shall we do? But the moment you say, you know, we need to book, but we need to secure 20% there, the question is, what do I do if this thing comes back?
Mm.
And many of our clients we do a lot of multi-gens. The people paying the bill are in their late 70s or early 80s, and they are not comfortable at all making those sorts of commitments, and they're fairly large commitments.
I think what we need to realize here as well is, as I mentioned earlier, that this is not going to be over for many years to come.
No.
This is a rolling series.
Absolutely.
So what we do now in the short term actually needs to last us for the next few years ahead. I don't think a knee-jerk reaction now is the solution at all. So Jono, what do you think would be your suggestion from your side?
The biggest issue we're facing is financial security. The biggest letdown for us, in my opinion, is travel insurance companies. You know, we've all bought travel insurance, but it doesn't cover this. And the ones that do cover it, they fall back on, but now the government's installed travel bans, so you're buggered twice over. And these are big picture items. I think governments moving forward will have to enforce travel insurance companies to at least pay 50% of the bill of this, because this pandemic is not going away very quickly. It's going to be around for a long time, and holding out for a vaccine is, HIV is a virus. It's 40 years later, we don't have a vaccine. And it's something we're going to have to live with. And no one's going to get, as I said to my lawyer the other day, how do I do new terms and conditions for this? Because who is going to book a $100,000 holiday, walk down to Sydney airport, and at that last minute on the Qantas lady puts a temperature gun to your client's head and says, sorry, mate, you're not coming on this flight. You can't, who's going to financially guarantee that money? We can't, insurance companies can't. So how do we, you know, these are bigger things beyond getting people on a plane, and that's this financial security. One thing might be, you know, paying a smaller deposit. I'm finding, you know, 30% deposits that we currently take. When someone puts down $100,000 deposit, books $100,000 holiday and puts down a $30,000 deposit, when they know they're going to lose $30,000, that then gives them reason to go to lawyers and start class actions, because it's a lot of money. When they're losing, you know, let's say 10% of that, it's less likely that they're going to go crazy about it. So it's, the biggest problem though is financial security, and how we even get people on planes.
Yep.
And Jono, can I just add something about insurance? We have been getting back insurance claims now from customers in various places, and there are people who have canceled. And the insurance companies are not taking face value in their wording. We are no longer accepting original terms and conditions from suppliers. We need to know there's no future credit offered. It's basically saying, we're going to pay as little as possible here.
It's been a nightmare.
Absolute nightmare.
Muriel, you know what we've just witnessed twice now is getting T's and C's from our clients' insurers. Well, T's and C's or notes, I don't exactly know what document it was, where the insurers are actually encouraging and motivating clients to charge back to the agent or the tour operator. Because what it means is they get the money from us and they're not, don't need to claim it from the actual insurer. I mean, it's
really, yeah, it's crazy.
So Maija, going forward in terms of protecting business getting business into Africa, what would be your recommendation, or what do you see as the biggest obstacle or biggest opportunity?
I think for clients to be assured, like it was many years ago, or reassured in this case now, that the monies that they do pay over are ring-fenced and are safe, and that the monies are being held on their behalf. I mean, you gave a good example of how your legislation works in Canada. I think that's a big point, because then clients shouldn't be too adverse to paying, you know, 20 or 30%. The flip side of that argument is, of course, to have very lenient terms and conditions with most of the actual deposits, or lack of better word for now, to be refundable to the client if they end up cancelling. You know, again, it's the client. We all rely on the client to book and come to Africa. So we need to think about this from their perspective and what they're going to be willing to put down in the world post-COVID-19. So I haven't really answered your questions, but these are certainly some of the things going around in our heads.
And Cherri, what would you think?
Yeah, I personally feel very positive about Africa. I think that we are in we have an opportunity here to make Africa the safe destination, the destination of choice. And whether or not we're successful in that, it's going to depend on what we're able to work out, not only with governments, but with lodges and airlines. Insurance, I'm not convinced that they'll ever come around. I think the insurance has to come from us. The assurance has to come from the providers and ourselves, in that if this comes back, we don't know exactly what this beast is going to do next. Our providers have promised us that they'll give you an extension, possibly with increased fees, different prices for the next year. If you can't go next year, you can go the next year. But they're not, and you know, we're adamant about this. We are not giving cash back ever at all. That whatever deposits we have, we will credit you, and we'll figure out a way that that credit can serve you or others. And I think it's absolutely essential that we stick to that, you know, firm place. And if we do that universally, it's not going to be a problem. But I was talking to Wilderness, for example. I don't know if anybody from Wilderness is listening, just the other day about this. And it's like, the security points, safety is key. Everybody wants the experience. If you can get there and not catch it, then, and you can get out and get home, you don't have to worry about great hospitals. Then you'd be okay. So airlines are making these sounds about really testing people at airports and not letting them on if they have positive tests, blood tests with Emirates. You know, there are a lot of people looking at this right now. If you know you can get on that plane, great. But you also have to go through TSA here. I guess New Zealand is lucky that way. They don't have to go through anything. But, you know, there have to be modifications by the airlines and by the government so that people don't have to pack in like sardines in a closed space for an hour to get through immigration. Then when you land, okay, you need to know that plane is safe. And I think we'll be there in 6 months. I think we will be there. But when you get off the plane, if you're going to Botswana and you're going to that little Maun airport, something different has to happen there than what's happening now, where they have 300 people from 4 flights. Well, there won't be 4 flights, so that'll be, you know, resolve itself to some degree. But you cannot be crammed into that horrible little airport. Now they're building the new airport, but one idea was to have the different big providers have their own kiosks outside the airport on the tarmac, you know, a little fenced in area where you check, they pay for the immigration official. They take on that burden from government. So you're going on a wilderness safari, you go there, you're on and beyond, you go there, you're on Desert and Delta, you go there, and there are 20 people, not 200. And then you immediately walk to your plane. Then there's the issue with planes. And this is where I can't imagine how safari is not going to become a lot more expensive, which could change the demographics of who's traveling. The psychographics, I was talking to the head of one of the hospitals here in Colorado who runs the ICU unit. And she was saying, you know, some people are going to be far more predisposed to risk than others. So we have to start figuring out who those people are that are not averse to risk and make sure that they're getting the message. You can go to Africa. So if you land there, you can get there. You're going to be on a plane that cannot be 5 strangers in a 206. Nobody's going to be happy with that. Maybe we start doing more mobile safaris. Maybe people are picked up and drive through.
Well, I'm predicting that we're going to see a lot more exclusive use destinations, private villas, and self-drive destinations.
Absolutely. Yes.
Justin, what are your thoughts?
I agree with what Muriel said at the beginning. It's not about price, but it is about protection. Now, protection is both the safety on the ground and also financial protection beforehand. I think there'll be a lot of practical solutions coming out in the next few months, from airlines to airports to on the ground in hotels and lodges. But I agree with you, Suzanne, that privacy will be a key thing going forward. Back to that, the big thing about travel insurance, I think unfortunately the travel industry is very fragmented. The insurance companies are very strong. They have lobbying power with governments, so do the credit card companies. So we're not going to see any change there certainly in the short term or even medium term on that. And back to Cherri's point there, we have to give the clients assurance about that. And I'm afraid there is a certain amount of flexibility in if at the last minute they do stop getting on the plane, there has to be some sort of refund of monies for them there to give them that assurance. But I think it's an opportunity for us. I come back to that we're about people. And people are not going to book things online necessarily at the moment. They want to speak to people. They want to have those questions answered. And so there is an opportunity for us to give that assurance to clients.
Yeah. Okay, and
Yeah,
then Craig, finally, your summary on that side.
Well, I agree with you. I agree with the panel. I don't think deep discounting is going to make any difference in terms of pricing and getting people to come here. But what I do think is that going forward and looking forward as an industry, and we're talking now for the next 3 to 5 years, and especially if this is going to be the scenario with us, is we have to be super agile on pricing. And I think you know that I've always been a big fan of whatever you want to call it, dynamic pricing, flexible pricing. I think that for us as an industry going forward in Southern Africa is crucial, where we're not fixed to rates long term, where our suppliers have the ability to change rates regularly and at will, depending on their occupancies and depending on demand. And I think most of the DMCs now have moved to a state where they have the technology and the systems to be able to cope with multiple changes on rates over a short period of time. And I think if we can put those rates out to marketplace, do away with things like special offers. I think South Africa as a destination is swamped with special offers. I think they're very unwieldy. I think they're hard to manage. I think they're hard for systems to cope with. I think if you were to translate special offers into much more competitive pricing that can be adjusted regularly, short notice, I think that's the way to go for the industry. Bearing in mind, though, Suzanne, also from the supplier side, that even dynamic pricing needs to have some sort of protection for the channel and the trade.
Craig, I'm totally into the protection side of it. That isn't a concern whatsoever. And I fully agree that we need to have far more dynamic pricing. Asking now to set a rate for October 2021, you're thinking, you must be out of your mind. I don't even know what's happening this October, let alone next October. So the day of setting rates in advance is, I think, personally gone. We've been advising our members, just set a rate for now. Just do whatever. Just, this is the rate for now. And if you want to change it whenever you want to change it. But we just need to be far more flexible. And saying now that we want to have a stay 4, pay 3 and, June, I think those days are long gone. We need to look at longer stay offers, because I think that there's going to be far less flying. So if somebody wants to start saying 7 nights, 10 nights, like go to Machaba and you do a 7-night circuit, the Bushcamp Company or any of those destinations, we need to encourage long stays. We need to encourage an easier connection between destinations. But I feel the same. I don't think discounting is the way to go. In the short term, though, I have to say, I do believe that as product in Southern Africa, we can look at doing some more regional rates, and it should not be based on trying to achieve an average bed night, but it should rather be based on as actually creating ambassadors out of local Africans. Because in the past, most South Africans bugger off to Italy to go and ski, not a good idea, or they've gone elsewhere. But we need people to actually be traveling in Africa and be proudly African as well. The other question I just wanted to ask, which has come from Grant Cummings, which has just come through here, is what changes, if any, are you seeing in booking requests, and any new inquiries you're receiving, any new trends that are revealing themselves for the future safari goers?
Our typical clients from Australia, they're so far from everything. They do these long 3-4 week journeys, Cape Town to Cairo in that time. I think those days are definitely gone. Just the pure logistics of that and the movement through airports and airlines, and we're postponing holidays at the moment, which is great, but it was based on 2019, 2020 logistics. 2021, we have no idea. I cannot think Airlink, for example, are going to fly multiple flights to multiple Kruger airports in the first 6 months of 2021. The demand and the load will not be there. So these trips we're postponing will have to be re-engineered again at the beginning of next year, free of charge, because that's the bed we're in at the moment. And if this carries on for another year, we're going to have to rejig it again. So slower, more defined travel in one, flying all the way to Africa and spending 10 nights in one camp or one reserve is probably what will happen in the future in the short term.
I completely agree. I think the days of 2 nights, 5 and 10 days is completely gone. I think it's going to be a more purposeful, connected, slower travel, and where people want to, we're also working towards people wanting to have far more purpose in every single destination and get involved. And we're looking at creating experiences now where you can get out of the vehicle and actually get involved in conservation activities, learn more about something, and be far more connected to the destination, and at the same time connecting with your family and friends as well.
But Suzanne, is that not what we want? We want people to move around less and stay longer. You know, I read an interesting thing. Air France, when they got their bailout from the French government, they've put out a mandate that they will no longer operate flights that can be reached by the TGV in 2.5 hours.
Yep.
Which I think is a brilliant thing. Why are we flying from Paris to Toulouse? You know, it's like, why are we moving from 2 nights here to 2 nights that's, you know, a 20-minute plane ride away? Maybe I'm oversimplifying, but I think the longer stays are what we all want.
Muriel, I promise you we won't put your clients on South African railways in South Africa.
Please. Also, just on that note of caution, if tourism boards and, you know, the ministries of tourism and the ministries of health can start talking to each other a little bit more. And within the countries, I just feel like governments are going to have such an effect on what happens to our business. And oftentimes we operators, we don't talk to them enough. I'm sure some of you who are lodge owners feel like you talk to them way too often, but they are going to have play a giant role in this. I mean, I think we need the approval from governments to have more private vehicles within a concession. It's highly restricted in Botswana and some places, as you all know. And that's going to make a big difference. People are not going to want to be more than 4 people in a vehicle instead of the standard 6 at the more high-end lodges. Space is going to be premium, and we need to have enough cards and enough top guides to go around, and guides need to be tested all the time, like the White House, every day. So testing is going to be a big part of what happens with the lodges on the ground. Andy has more of a challenge than some people there in Mfui, which is just such a hub with so many people coming, but some of the lodges will be very easy to control. If this group of staff comes in for 4 months, they stay there. When the next group comes in, they're either tested in an absolutely trustworthy way, or they go into a quarantine camp before they go into the real camp. So there are ways to make the perception of Africa as being safe, you know, a tremendous draw. The plains of the Serengeti are going to really be a big draw. The fact that, you know, lodges have to break up tables. Nobody's going to want to sit at that group table and go to the buffet. So there are subtle changes in how the operations are done. But if you can, I feel that if we can get the people there, if the planes are operating, if they can be safe and we can ameliorate the clog at immigration, we can get people to Africa. I just hope the flight isn't more expensive than the safari.
Yeah. Okay, guys, I think we're about to wrap up now. We are going into well over our time slot. And just, I'm going to wrap up the 5 key points that I've pulled out of this is that, 1, our trade partners, which is you, are absolutely essential going forward, and we value what you do. And you should really proudly add value to something and realize that you do actually have a critical component to play. Don't hide behind your expertise, but actually stand in front of that and say you do offer value in the whole purpose, in the whole process. And secondly, our terminology needs to change. Commissions, deposits, non-refundable this, all of these words that we are currently using are out of date. Used for 30 years and they haven't at all changed with the times. We need to start thinking up a new terminology that works for everybody on a much more equitable basis as well, that explains where the value lies and what the responsibilities are on the ground as well. So if somebody needs to do something in terms of building a camp, training staff, and there's an upfront cost, we need to be transparent about that cost and explain it in our terminology. Not to be discounting. which I think is a fantastic objective, but to offer more flexibility. The real way of getting business going forward is going to be in our terms and conditions and the relationships that we have with you as our trade partners on that side as well. And then fourthly is to offer more purpose-driven travel, to look at going to destinations that you are really connecting with, and that when you've made that decision as a traveler and you've invested that $30,000 or deposit plus that $100,000, you've brought your whole family with you, you've done all of that, you need to know that where you're going actually is doing some good. And I know about Fogo Island offering that nutrition label, which I think is brilliant, and we're looking at doing something similar here in Africa as well, to say, what are you contributing towards? Because that is one thing that people do feel good about in Africa, is this wonderful contribution on things. And lastly, it is about us collaborating. It is about these partnerships that we have that are absolutely critical. And I look at the people that are sitting here in front of me today, and I realize we've all been around this table for a long time. And the relationships that we've had that have worked in this crisis have been the long, good standing ones. We've got some great friends in this industry, and we are here completely to support that. And when you do have a problem, and I've had some argy-bargies with some of you in the past as well, but you can pick up the phone and talk to each other. And we work through these things because we know that our businesses need to survive together. And I think that that's where we need to be building things going forward. So I really value your time today. I value your inputs. I think it's been a wonderful way of understanding your perspective on things. And I always say, let's keep this discussion open. We are here to listen to you. And as we start developing new terms and conditions and deposit policies or whatever else it is, experiences on the ground, we need to engage with you and make sure that we are going in the right direction. And for you guys to be telling us as well what is required from your side. So I thank you to all the fantastic attendees who've joined us. I really appreciate it. And to all our panelists and our trade partners, to keep supporting us, please. And we look forward to rolling out this storm and getting through these mountain ranges as we have ahead of us. So thank you very much to everybody. And a big thank you to my team who've doing the backup and putting everything together in the background as well. So thank you, guys.